before the formal program will begin with the question and answer period. But before Terry Buford, the director of the library, will introduce the board members later on. But they'll do a little presentation, a little informational presentation on what's being proposed and the finances involved and a lot of other things concerning it. Where's Terry?
Right behind you.
Okay, then Terry's going to start off, and we will have some audio-visual things, and you'll be able to get an idea of what's going on. Write some questions out there, and then we'll read the questions to the board, and they'll come up with all the answers. Is that correct, Terry?
That is correct.
Okay, then. Why don't you go ahead?
Thank you, Joe. The way things are going to work tonight is I'll be running through these slides on this presentation, making some observations. Supervisor DeRizio, the president of the library board, Stephanie Squicciarini, and the library board treasurer, Carol Momano, will occasionally jump in with some comments as well. Once we're done with this, the board will sit here and we will attempt to answer your questions. So welcome tonight. This is our 20th, as I count it, our 20th presentation, either in this room or around town to various organizations, explaining our proposal for a new library here on the Town Hall campus. So we're talking about a building of up to 60,000 square feet in size, and of course that's going to depend on how much money we raise and how we do with grant seeking. But we're talking about a building large enough to have a cutting-edge 21st century library with a lot of extra meeting room space for community groups, for cooperation with other town departments, and the other sorts of things that the residents of the town tell us they want in their library, like study rooms, like a children's area that children can use without bothering other people, a building that's accessible for people with mobility issues, decent restrooms are just a few of the things that we'll gain when we build this new library.
Some other features that we want to make sure are included in this space are flexible and adaptable spaces. So as the needs for our library based on our community, as those needs may change, the library will be able to more easily change with those needs. So flexibility and adaptability will be key components.
Currently, the library is not meeting the needs of 21st century library users. The last expansion or renovation of library buildings in Irondequoit was done in 1985. I like to say that in 1985, an electric typewriter was a high-tech equipment. And so the buildings are not only too small, but they are woefully lacking in infrastructure. That electric typewriter was one of the few things that we had to plug in to run the library. Now, you know, everything is electric, and the infrastructure of the buildings is really hurting. But it's not just the lack of space for the public, lack of space for the staff as well means we operate very inefficiently. The fact that we're trying to do what other towns do in much larger buildings in 12,000 square foot buildings is a constant struggle for us. So here's a chart that illustrates some of the things that we're concerned about. Across the bottom of this chart, you'll see the names of all of the major towns in the Monroe County Library system. And up the left-hand side is the number of years since they either built a new library or renovated their existing library or expanded it. And as you can see, we lead the league in this category. And it's not a category you want to be a leader in. Gates and Greece have no bar because Gates built a brand new building within the last year. Greece just did the second renovation of their building that's only about 12 years old. One of the things Greece did was when they built their original building, they had to downsize it because of cost concerns, and they cut out a couple meeting rooms that were going to be in that building. And now they have gone ahead and put them back in. And when we talk about meeting room space and its importance, I think you have a really great illustration there, because not only did they renovate their building to add the meeting rooms back in, but right across the parking lot from that building is a community center / senior center that has lots of meeting room space there. So they're feeling the demand, and we are too. Here's another chart. Again, across the bottom of the chart are the major towns in the Monroe County Library System and their populations, and up the left-hand side is the number of square feet that they have in their library facilities. And again, we're not the lowest, but we're almost the lowest. But this chart's a little deceiving, because as you see Irondequoit checking in at 24,000 square feet, that's not really the way it works here. We have two 12,000 square foot buildings, and in each one of those 12,000 square foot buildings, we're trying to do what Greece is doing with 38,000 square feet, and what Webster's doing with 43,000 square feet. And those are both towns that have community centers with tons of extra meeting room space, and we have none of that. So, as I was saying with the previous slide, it's a constant struggle to try to do what everyone expects us to do in the county's second largest town, in a building that's 1/3 the size of some of these other towns. Recently at one of our meetings, someone said, "Hey, I like your library idea, but what's the rush?" We don't feel like we're rushing, and here's why. In 1985, the two branches were expanded to the 12,000 square feet that they're at now. Almost immediately, the library started feeling the pinch for not having enough space, and the town had space issues for other departments. So between the town board and the library board, some studies were undertaken, lots of them. 98, 99, 2002, 2003, 2005, 2006, 2009, 2012. So my question for you is, if you look at all those studies that were done, they were all done by different companies, and they all had different aims or different scopes, but they all have one thing in common. And does anybody know what that is? The one thing they all have in common is that nothing ever got done. They just did another study. So we say it's time to wrap up the studies and time to get to work. So we're proposing a building right out here on the Town Hall campus. The Town Hall campus is the central location. Our town engineer, Mr. Heiniger, plotted out where that library would be in relation to the rest of the town, and no place in town is more than 3.7 miles away. Compared to other towns in the county, that is the shortest distance of any major town farthest point from their public libraries. So we'd have the most central library in the entire library system. Building here on the Town Hall campus means we don't have to buy any land as part of the cost of the project. It doesn't take any land off the tax rolls. If we sell the McGraw Branch on Ridge Road, property would be returned to the tax rolls. Our studies indicate that parking will not be a problem, and that the town's festivals, like the 4th of July Festival, will still be able to be held on the Town Hall campus. And the town is making some adjustments to the way the campus works. They're adding more parking north of the Department of Public Works building. And we're determined to solve any traffic flow or parking problem. So the festivals, parking, we feel like we're on top of it. So one of the things that we did when we first started thinking about building a library on the Town Hall campus is we asked a couple of local architectural firms to whip up some drawings of what the building might look like. Why they didn't design a building for us is because design services are extremely expensive. And we didn't want to spend that money on something that we weren't sure that we were going to be able to do. And so until the referendum passes, we won't engage an architect and actually pay money for the design of the real building, just because we don't want to spend literally hundreds of thousands of dollars for something that's not going to happen. But what you're looking at here is a concept from Passero Associates, and as you can see, it is a 2-story, I think it's actually a 2.5-story building. They've converted the East Branch of Columbus Way out here into a pass-through with parking, and then most of the parking is around to the other side of the building between the new building and the Department of Public Works. We're talking about back in here. We're not changing Titus Avenue to a 4-lane road, though. It's a county highway. We can't do that. So this is a drawing from Barkstrom and LaCroix, another local firm. They have a slightly different concept. Their concept is different from the Passero concept in that they did not have Columbus Way turn into a parking lot, and they have all the parking between the new library and the DPW building. They, instead of having equal-sized floors, put more of the building on the first floor. The reason for that is that the more you have on one floor, the easier it is to administer, the easier it is to supervise, the easier it is to monitor what's going on in the library while it's open.
I'd like to add there's also some additional rendering, some additional concept out in the hallway that you may have seen when you came in that eliminates the courtyard that Barkstrom and LaCroix had originally planned in their concept between the town hall and the new building. And that would be additional, or would be additional parking, and the drive-through Columbus Way would be maintained. So that's another, and actually in the hallway there's also concept floor plans that show the breakdown of the different square footages for the different areas within the library.
There's also a document out there that kind of shows how much square footage would be assigned to each function of the library. That was a result of our work with the Thomas Group back in 2005. It was one of those studies that was on that list. This is the picture we love. This is a picture of the Town Hall campus, 1948. This is the original concept drawing for the Town Hall. And what's interesting is that part of the original concept was a building on either side of the Town Hall, and to the right of the Town Hall was going to be a public library. So 67 years later, by the time we get done, we'll finally have made this happen. Tom Broderick? Yeah, Tom Broderick was the supervisor. This room is named after him. He had a vision. So we put this map in here just so you can really see how central the Town Hall campus really is. That red dot that's right there in the central part of town is what we're talking about. No more than 3.7 miles from any point in town. And almost equal distance between the two branches. As close as we're probably going to get. So we've talked a little bit about how library services can improve in a larger building, and so there's much more to say about that. We worked with a consultant a few years ago who conducted focus groups with residents to talk about what they liked and didn't like about the library. And one of the questions that we worked with was, what do you want to see in your library? What do you want to see if we build a new library? People ask for a lot of things, but there's some common themes that run through some of the things they say. They want a quiet study area so that when the activities are going on in the library and it gets a little noisy, as modern libraries do, We're out of the shushing era. There's a quiet place where you can, where quiet will be enforced, and you can work and concentrate and not be interrupted, no matter what else is going on in the library. People are asked for small study areas where small groups of between, say, 2 and 8 people could meet and work on group projects together without disturbing the people around them, but still have access to Wi-Fi and outlets and things like that. Dedicated areas for children and teens so that they can enjoy the library without disturbing others. And of course, more seating, more computers, and more elbow room between the computers. Right now, if you're in the library and if you're lucky enough to get on a computer without waiting, you have trouble actually getting any work done because there's barely enough elbow room to spread out your papers and actually work on anything. And then the next thing you know, the 45 minutes that we limit you to is up. It's tough. It's really tough when people are waiting and somebody's used up their 45 minutes and they're not quite finished with their work, and it's a nightmare of public service is what it really is. So we can solve all those problems. And of course, one of the things that we get asked for all the time is meeting room space. Meeting room space for library programs, for programs that other town departments give that need a bigger space. Community groups and organizations, we met with many of them, and as soon as we brought this up, you could just see the people in the room start nodding their heads. Man, wouldn't it be great if we could have a space where we could have a meeting? And of course, making the buildings accessible to people with mobility issues, especially the restrooms. We are so far behind the curve on that. It's embarrassing.
Other ways that services in library will be improved is right now library staff need to discard items when we purchase new items. So they're discarding items because we're so out of space based almost solely on the fact that we don't have space for them. So our collections will be better because we'll be able to hold on to books longer, we'll be able to add materials that people have been asking for and have the space for those materials. Other things that we're finding is that our efforts and our tax dollars are being split between 2 branches. So we'd be able to offer more, and our tax dollars would be used a lot more efficiently and be able to do more things and new things for the community with those tax dollars.
Of course, for some people, it would be most convenient if the library just went away. And they keep saying that we are going away, and it just ain't true. First, the internet was going to cause us to go away. Now it's e-books that are going to make us go away. But the library's not going away. And the reason why that is because the library evolves to meet the needs of the community. And so whatever this community needs, the library will strive to provide it. But recently, the Pew Research Group, a national research organization with a great reputation, in January of this year released a study where they surveyed people throughout the country, including people who identified themselves as non-library users. And they still said that the most important thing to them for visiting the library was to borrow materials, and that the second most important thing was to use the internet or to access the Wi-Fi. Even 60% of young adults said they still visit the library often. 80% of respondents said borrowing books is important. And the same percent said that reference librarians answering their questions was important. And 77% said free access to the computers and the internet is very important to them. This does not sound like an institution that's going away. The library also has a special connection to the business community. Another recently released study by the Texas Department of Education, which has been duplicated in other states, showed that for every dollar that the state of Texas invested in libraries, $4.42 of measurable economic benefit resulted. Now, by measurable economic benefit, we're talking about things that can be measured, that can be quantified. So the value of materials that are lended, the value of materials that can be accessed in the library, the value of the computers and the free broadband internet access, and the expensive journal article databases with millions of articles in full text. They all have a dollar value that can be assigned to them. That's where the $4.42 for every dollar comes from. But there are also other benefits that the library offers that are business related that you can't even put a value on, and so they did not count them. The help that we give to the unemployed who are learning the new world of job searching. The help that we give to small businesses for information and for research. You can't quantify it, but it's there. And that is why the Irondequoit Chamber of Commerce has endorsed this project. And here's a quote from their declaration. The Irondequoit Chamber of Commerce recognizes a 21st century central library will offer the types of valued services and amenities that attract home buyers, retains homeowners, and keeps the business and spending power of residents in the Irondequoit community. For the good of our merchants and for the good of our residents, the Irondequoit Chamber of Commerce endorses this long overdue plan, no pun intended, to improve our town with a new central library. They made a point in there that I want to magnify a little bit, and that's keeping the spending power of residents in the community. One of the things I get as library director is a report that shows who goes to the library where. And large numbers of Irondequoit residents use libraries in other towns. Their libraries are better. I hate to say that, but it's true. And when they go to those other towns to use those libraries, and they're paying $3.70 for a gallon of gasoline, they're not just going to the library. They're like all the rest of us. They accomplish as much as they can on that trip. And they're spending money in other towns that they should be spending here, and propping up our sales tax revenue, and propping up our local businesses, our dry cleaners, our liquor stores, our grocery stores, our coffee shops. Instead, they're spending that in other towns. A very nice lady wrote a letter to the Irondequoit Post back in February that sort of outlines that concept. She was driving to Webster or to Greece to use the library and realized she was spending that disposable money in other towns. And she knew she should have been spending it here. But she wanted a quality library, so she was leaving town. The cramped branches were not doing it for me. Okay. Coming up, just slightly under 2 weeks, the ultimate survey is the referendum. 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. If you're a resident of the East Irondequoit School District, you will vote at the Ridge Culver Fire Department. If you are a resident of the West Irondequoit School District, you will vote at the St. Paul Fire Department on Cooper Road. If you're not sure which school district you live in, there's a map right out here in the hallway that will clue you in. There are 4 election districts in town that are split, and I think the supervisor wants to say a little bit more about that.
Yes, and those residents who were along that divide in town received postcards advising them of where they would be voting. I know some residents were not happy that they had to vote at that particular site, but it was the Monroe County Board of Elections that divided the town into the 2 polling sites. So that's why it had to be divided that way.
Okay, you do have to be a registered voter. There is a special voter registration day right here on April 13th. If you're not going to be in town and you want to vote, I think you can still get an absentee ballot from the town clerk.
And actually, the special day of registration will take place in each of the polling places. So if you're going to vote at Ridge Culver, you'll go to Ridge Culver to register to vote, and if you're going to vote at St. Paul. But if you're already a registered voter, meaning you've voted in the past town election or the past presidential election, you do not need to register again. That's only for people who may be new to the town or who haven't registered before.
Once that referendum passes, then we can move forward with this project. The referendum is you giving permission to the town government to borrow up to $13 million to build that new library. And the comptroller and the bond counsel and the financial advisors of the town tell us that if your house is worth $100,000, we're talking about $29 a year in additional taxes. 29 cents per $1,000 of assessed value. $2.42 a month. $29 a year. Or as I like to say, a large pizza and an order of wings. Maybe a six-pack too, depending on where you shop. Carol Mamano, who is an accounting professor at St. John Fisher College and the treasurer of the library board, has a little better grip on these things than I do.
Yeah, the $29 includes principal and interest. So that's one of the questions that has come up, or the information that people are asking about. Also, that $29 doesn't mean when the vote passes that we're going out the very next day and we're going to get this $13 million. We have met with our fiscal advisors, who are the financial advisors for the town, and there's different ways of the financing to go through. At the beginning, we'll do what's called bond anticipation notes, which is short-term borrowing. And that's going to take place as we need expenses for construction. And those can be taken out for anywhere from 2 to 5 years. And the interest rates right now on those have been less than 1%. So there's a lot of monitoring, there's a lot of viewing, there's a lot of review of exactly what's going on, and the best rates in interest to affect the town is how that will work. The bonds can be callable after 8 years. They can also be refinanced if interest rates go down lower. So the fact that we're saying $29 per year, that is the worst case scenario of what would happen on there, because we're also going to do aggressive fundraising, the sale of McGraw. We will also have be eligible once again for New York State construction grants. So all of that money will be coming in to furnish the library and to further reduce the costs that we need to borrow. So that's one of the things to think about when you're thinking about $29.
What we also like to talk about when it comes to finances is the cost of not doing this, or as we call it, the cost of doing nothing. Back in 2005, when we commissioned the Thomas Group to study our building situation, they went through the buildings and told us all the current buildings and told us all the things that needed to be done to make them short-term inhabitable, and if we wanted to stay them in for the long term and truly renovate them, what we would need to do and how much that would cost. And then last year we had Passero Associates go over that plan again, take out what we had already done, and then update the costs so that we would have an accurate fix on the numbers we're about to talk about. Some cosmetic improvements and short-term upgrades to stay in the buildings for a few more years would be over $2 million. Long-term improvements to stay in the buildings for much longer, which would include infrastructure upgrades like electrical systems and heating, ventilating, and air conditioning, and modern restrooms, would be over $6 million. And in both those cases, no additional space would be gained, so we'd still be in the same situation that we're in now.
Now, when you look at that slide, you see for the proposal that we're looking at, brand new library, $29 per year. The long-term improvements for $22 per year, you can't see the fine print, but that's only for 15 years. And because at the end of 15 years, there will be more improvements needed. This is only the short-term fix. Even less temporary improvements. And in both situations, we do not increase space. We still are cramped. We still will have duplicate expenses with one library. We'll reduce cost of 2 elevators, 2 copiers. We'll also be eliminating other duplications. We're going to be reducing the cost of staff who have to drive between branches or to town hall. So those are costs that'll be saved. All of our new infrastructure is going to be under warranty. We'll also have, I just lost my train of thought. So it has to do with reducing costs. In the shared services, because we'll be on this campus, trash services will share in the cost of that instead of having 2 trash waste removal like we do now with 2 branches. We'll also share in maintenance instead of having a maintenance person hired on our staff. So those are other costs of where we'll see the reduction in cost to also offset some of what we're doing.
I'm not an accountant, but I want to add to that too. The $29 per year for the library proposal, if we expand our space, we would once again qualify for New York State Library construction grants, which could be over the course of 2 years up to $1 million. The other two options, the shorter term improvements, because they wouldn't address our dire space issues, we would not qualify for those construction grants. So all of that money would come from taxpayers.
So we're not just asking you for money, we're working our tails off to find other ways to get money. We have a fundraising committee. As soon as this referendum passes, they will be out in the community actively seeking donations. There are grants that are available. The state construction grants will only be available to us for a project like this. As Stephanie said, they've told us that we'll no longer receive grant money to keep the current buildings going. There is also grant money available from New York State and even from the federal government for energy-saving technologies, green building approaches, recycled materials involved in your construction, things of that nature. As far as the existing branches go, and I had a question about this this week, what would happen to those buildings? The McGraw branch can be sold. Over the last few years, we've had offers for it. It's assessed at $1.1 million. So obviously, it's a commercial property that people are very interested in between Wegmans and Walgreens right on Ridge Road. I don't think that building will be vacant for very long. It's possible it could be knocked down and another building would be built. The Evans branch on Cooper Road is a different story. In 1963, when the library was built, the West Irondequoit School District owned that land, and they sold it to the town for $1, but there's a restriction on the deal that says that it has to be used for a public library or some other town purpose, or it reverts back to the school district. So in this case, it would revert back to the school district, and they might do something with it, or they might sell it. But that would return that property to the tax rolls, as would the McGraw branch. So in a way, there's still some benefit. So we have a challenge for you. If you haven't done this already, and I know that some of you probably have, in fact, many of you probably have, but those of you who have not, visit a public library in another town in this county. I don't care which one. And then come back and come through our buildings to refamiliarize yourself with what we have. If you want, contact me, and I will give you a guided tour of either or both buildings. No problem, whenever it suits you. And then compare them, and then decide whether we can do better and whether we should do better. We're confident what your answer will be. So yes, we've been holding regular meetings. As I was saying, this is our 20th meeting. We've met with everyone from senior citizen groups to seniors in high school and government classes. We've met with community organizations. We've held 5 forums here and 1 at the Bishop Kearney Auditorium. The video of these meetings is available on ICAT. There are DVDs of them that you can pick up at the library to view. We have a website, libraryproposal.com. That also leads to a Twitter feed for late-breaking information, twitter.com/libraryproposal. And also we have a Facebook page, facebook.com/libraryproposal. And there's my contact information at the bottom if you dare to take a tour of the branches, both the public and private staff areas. So hopefully you've been writing your questions down and passing them up. And at this time, we're all going to sit here and we're going to listen to your questions and we're going to answer them.
Helping me out tonight and doing some reading to the questions will be Rich Orzak, who's a town resident. He has a realty office in the town also, and I pretty much is in favor of this, I'm sure, with what he does on sales. Gave me all the questions. Before we begin, why don't we do a little introduction of the board? Mary Joyce first.
Mary Joyce Druzek, Town Supervisor.
John Perticone, Town Board, and I'm also the liaison to the Library Board.
David Heffer, and I'm an at-large member of the board, and I'm currently the longest-serving member of the board. I've been on this board since 2000.
Jack Harriman, resident of this town with my wife for over 60 years and former owner of Harriman's Marketplace.
Miriam Gans, this is my 2nd term on the library board, and right now I'm the secretary.
I'm Elaine Cole. I'm a over 30-year resident of the town, and I am in my 2nd term on the board.
Carol Mamano, treasurer of the board, and I've been on the board for about 7 or 8 years.
I'm Stephanie Squiccerini. I'm the president of the board. In my day job, I'm the teen services librarian at the Fairport Public Library, and I'm also the founder and director of the Greater Rochester Teen Book Festival. And I've been on the board between being on the board and then honorary member, I think it's 10 years-ish.
And I'm Terry Buford. I'm the library director. I just started my 10th year here, working at the best job I ever had.
Rich, if you'll go with the first question.
All right. Well, Joe, thank you for asking me to do this. I'm more than happy to. Is it a library learning center, or a library community center?
It's a library where the community will connect, so we like to call it a community gathering place, but it will be a library. It'll be all of those things for the community.
If the library is as successful as we think it will be, how are we going to handle parking?
We've got answers.
I'd ask Larry to come up if he can keep it short. Larry's an excellent engineer, but he is verbose. Yes, I want you to come up here, Larry. It's competition between the retired English teacher and the engineer. Parking has probably been one of the largest questions that has been posed of all of us. And I think perhaps we sometimes take advantage for those of us that visit the Pauline Evans branch and think there's lots of parking there, and the town doesn't own all the parking that is there. It's the Chase Bank parking and the United Church of Christ parking, and we tend to park there. But we know that's going to be changing in the very near future. So we have very limited parking at the Pauline Evans. We have more at the Helen McGraw branch for those that are willing to walk the distance from almost Culver Road. However, you will find that that parking lot is usually used for millings or stone by the construction companies, or where we have our chips when the trees are ground. So I asked Larry, and that's something we all have to keep in mind. What we have been looking at are renderings of what a library for the town of Irondequoit could be. They are only renderings. We do not know what they will look like yet. So we shouldn't prejudge our decision based on the renderings. The same is true with the parking. We are limited by the bond amount, so we don't really know how big the building is going to be. But Larry, in his infinite knowledge and his background in engineering, has examined the rules for parking, particularly in a spot such as our town hall campus. So even before we had posed that this centralized library could be on the east lawn, we knew we were going to start moving the DPW parking over to where the Keeble House was located and put all of those cars, trucks, and so forth over there. Over the last 2 years, we've been improving the DPW site for the residents on Kings Highway by putting that berm in, trees and so forth. The new cold storage facility looks really nice. So what we want to do too is kind of hide those vehicles down in that area, which would free up significantly the parking along this side. Also, we have been, because I was concerned on flow of traffic in the parking lot, we have been initiating a new flow pattern and getting employees to park over closer to the west lawn of the town campus. I said, that's a good business practice. Your customers need to have the best parking. They shouldn't be the ones walking to conduct business. So we've been slowly getting them to go over into the parking that's closer to the west lawn. So Larry has come up with a scenario based on one of the renderings, and he can talk to you about how the code is. This is R1 zoning, in which a library is permitted, and when you think about it, we have a court, a police department, and a DPW facility here. So a library is sort of a mild-mannered facility to place on this campus. And he's going to say I talk too much.
I just
All right,
want to
thank
share
you.
this here.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
This is a rendering that I put together with our town hall campus, but before I go into there, I put together some metrics on Monday for Mary Joyce of various parking requirements. The Thomas Group that Terry alluded to earlier did a study, and they recommended for a 50,000 square foot library, 150 spaces. So let's just hold that number in the air. A book I have upstairs, it's over 800 pages, Time Saver Standards for Site Planning by DeChair and Koppelman, recommends minimum, maximum, mean, and mode. And for mode for a 50,000 square foot library, it's 165 spaces, so a little more than 150. By our own town code, a library says follow retail. What retail says is you need to have 4.5 per thousand per gross leasable area. So if you build a 50,000 square foot building with 80% of it usable, meaning not hallways, not stairwells, not restrooms, the parking requirement would be 180 spaces. If you're at 85, it would be 192. So I asked our planning board chairman Monday night, who was a practicing architect, Peter, have you ever designed a building that had greater than 85% leasable area and only 15%, I'll just say waste? And he said, no, it's basically impossible. So all of these numbers are then fluctuating between 150 up to 200 spaces. So what have we got here? We've got Columbus Way staying where it is, and we're loading it with 20 spaces on one and 17 on the other. Obviously, I could get more spaces if I took down a big oak tree. And then you've got new parking. This is where it's darker shading in gray, and then parking dedicated here. So the dedicated parking for the library during the day would be 105 spaces. After 4 o'clock for the DPW, 4:30 here, 20 more spaces open here, 18 spaces open here, and over 60 open in here, which is only half of the existing lot, and now the count goes up to 215 spaces available. The other thing that's important is that the peak traffic for a library is not 7 to 9 in the morning when people are going to work, and in the morning, the traffic later in the morning is not as great as it is in the evening. So the greatest traffic generation of the library is in the evening as business at the town hall winds down. And if you do a nose count here, there aren't that many people in the building. Most of it, like tonight, the parking lot's fairly full because you're all here. So we feel that there's adequate parking here. Obviously, I could add another bay here, take down more trees, but based on all the standards recommendations of the 150 to 200, with 100 dedicated during the day and up over 200 in the evening, we feel there'll be adequate parking. And what I've shown here is two footprints. One would be the kind of two-story building and one would be a three-story building, similar to what the building we're in now. That decision hasn't been made yet. These are just thoughts, and we're holding the 30-foot setback, side setback, and the 50-foot front setback from the right-of-ways of Kings Highway and Titus Avenue.
Thank you, Larry.
Rich?
Are we looking at doing anything to offset the 29 cents per thousand cost to the residents, such as appealing state mandates?
Well, we wouldn't be appealing them, but we'd qualify for New York State Library construction grants again, which would give us approximately, we're anticipating $1 million over the course of two grant cycles, about $500,000 for each cycle. We're also, as Terry mentioned in the presentation, we have a fundraising committee consisting of board members and community members. We're looking at fundraising at different levels. So if you'd like the library named after you, let us know. So all of these things will help to reduce the bond debt, help furnish the building, offset the cost as much as possible to the taxpayer. Something else that Carol had mentioned, the short-term borrowing that is possible for the 2 to 5 years of the initial construction phases or as the construction builds up. That is all time that we'd be able to know how our fundraising efforts are going and secure that fundraising. So at the point where we would need to bond for the fuller amount, we may not even need to bond for the fuller amount because we could have those larger donations in place. So we may not even need to borrow the full $13 million.
I'm not real happy with that one slide in the PowerPoint because that is a general order of magnitude. That's also based on the town assessment not increasing over the next 30 years. So that in itself is not an accurate scenario because obviously we would anticipate, particularly with the energy that's suddenly rising on Ridge Road. We do know that with the bans over the next couple of years, it's probably only going to cost us 4 cents. Something we need to keep in mind too, we've kept the tax rate stable for 4 years, and I anticipate we'll do that for another year. In the last 3 years, we have significantly built the fund balances that will offset any contingencies that could happen, also in terms of keeping the tax rate stable. There are other things that we have forecasted in the future in our capital improvement plan, but some of those are being revamped based on priority because when it comes to this town, I think everyone is beginning to feel that the library is a priority. So, you know, that slide is a tough one. And I know everyone is sensitive to their taxes because when you get your tax bill, you see that sum at the bottom and we all go, and we think about what our full tax rate is in the aggregate because of the school taxes. But I want you to keep in mind that when you look at the town and county tax bill, your town tax is almost the smallest tax on your tax bill. Your fire district is getting close to the town tax rate. But in terms of your town tax, if you have a $100,000 home, and that's what your tax is based on without your star or any exemptions, your town tax is $651. So for that, you're getting your public safety, the police department, funding the courts. That may be something we don't like. Code enforcement, building department, the town clerk, all of your services for town government. So if you're paying tax on $100,000, that's only $651. Thank you.
Go ahead, Rich.
Have we looked at constructing the library behind the DPW salt pile? Not sure why that area couldn't be prepared for the library, and it would have very nice wooded views.
That's the...
Because of the salt barn fire, we had to do borings of all of that property back there to see where the salt barn would be located. We had wanted to put it at another spot back there. The soil does not substantiate the ability to hold the weight of a building, so it's not buildable.
Why don't we just expand the library where it already is? Because it's really useful for those people to drive or to not drive, and it's closer to the high schools.
A couple things there. When we first started looking at what to do with the library buildings, we brought in a team of structural engineers, and they studied each building and talked to us about expandability. The Evans branch on Cooper Road is probably the thorniest problem in terms of expansion. We only own small pieces of land right around the building. Only the parking spaces that are immediately adjacent to the building are on town land. The big space behind the library where all those parking spaces are, that's owned by the church. All the other parking spaces are, as Mary Joyce said, owned by the bank and the church. So very difficult to expand horizontally at Evans. Both Evans and McGraw are buildings that were built originally identically, and they were never intended to have a second floor put on them. But we asked the engineers to tell us, well, if we could put a second floor on them, and they said, oh yes, absolutely, but you'd have to have a post about every 6 feet in both the basement and on the first floor in order to do that. And so that did not sound good to us. And the only other option would be to knock the building down and start over. And then we'd still have 2 buildings splitting our resources. Obviously, McGraw's a little different. There's more room there to build horizontally. But then you'd have unequal services, and we weren't especially enamored of that idea either.
And the estimated cost to build new, if we were to take down the buildings and start fresh so that we would have more usable space on those pieces of property, was estimated to be close to $18 million. So we didn't feel that was a good use of the money. Plus, we'd still have those duplications and redundancies by maintaining 2 branches. The other thing is it could also involve purchasing additional land around each building, which means people's homes. So that was another reason why we did not think that that option was the best use and the best option.
We also looked at one point to see if we could just expand McGraw, since that had more space to it and everything else, and then have to shut down the Evans branch. And in looking at that and going out and talking and getting proposals from architects, it could be done, but again, we would have had to buy land around it. So again, that meant we would have had to purchase property of people's homes around there in order to get one building on that site that would be suitable for this town.
And I just want to say a word about people in the neighborhoods close to the 2 branches being able to walk easily to the libraries. Since 1963 or whatever that year was, when these 2 branches went up, nobody in Somerville walked to the library. Nobody in the Laurelton district in East Arundel, east side of town walked to the library. Nobody in Seabreeze walked to the library. So I didn't walk to the library. And by the way, I've lived in my house for 66 years now, and I never did have a chance to walk to the library. And I still won't actually be able to walk to the library since I'm not moving. However, the people who do have the houses now in the neighborhood close to the town hall, now this group is going to be able to walk to the library. So it does seem fair that we spread that little advantage around.
Go ahead, Rich.
Is there going to be any volunteering opportunities for teens at the new library?
Absolutely. We use many volunteers now, and so there would definitely be opportunities for them. We also employ teens at the library as well. We're one of the area's larger teen employers, and volunteers are welcome.
I have a question here. Will the budget of the library have to be increased in order to run the new building?
There's going to be increases and reductions that will throughout with the budget itself. Right now, the largest expense of our budget is for personnel and benefits. We are not adding more staff, even though we expect to be open more hours and doing more programming. By having all the staff in one location, we'll be able to use them more efficiently. We do know areas that, some areas that will increase. We know that the utility cost will increase because it's a larger building, but at the same time, we'll be using greener technology so that in more efficient systems. So exactly how much that will increase, that we're not going to know right now. Our insurance, property insurance, will go up because it's based on the town's policy, bases it on square footage of the building. So that will go up. However, right now, neither branch has fire sprinkler systems in it. This new building will. So by having those in there, that cost increase is going to be reduced by the amount of, simply because we're going to be better protected. We will also, duplication costs, some of the costs that I had mentioned, like two elevators, we won't need those. Costs will shift into our materials. We have to submit the budget to the town board. Then the town board is the one who approves our budget. And we have to stay within the 2% cap. So we cannot just raise everything, and nor will we need to.
Okay, the question that's already answered that I received, does the 29 cents per thousand include both principal and interest, and that was addressed earlier?
Instead of Starbucks, have we looked at using a local coffee shop to run the shop there?
It's one of the main questions. Are we going to have a coffee shop?
We don't have an exact vendor, and Starbucks was an original question that came to us. Will you have Starbucks in there? We anticipate to have this space for a vendor. We're looking at coffee and things like that, nothing that where strong smells would waft into the library. And that facility would be leasing from the library. So that rental income we get is also something that will be going against our budgets and costs.
And the other most frequently asked questions, it will not disturb any of the events that they have at the town, like the 4th of July celebration and other things. So they'll be scattered in different areas, but it will not interfere with the music, the beer tent, and other things in there. All right, so that's one of the standard questions that always gets answered.
Would the new library accommodate conventions, or could it accommodate conventions?
Very small ones.
Well, not large-scale conventions, but maybe smaller conferences or smaller programs. For instance, the Central Library just had a really fantastic conference, a 2-day conference that they held with people from all over the region came on the future of libraries and technologies and the ways that communities are evolving with their libraries. So that could be something that we could we could do. But as far as when I think conventions, I'm thinking like hundreds of thousands of people. But, you know, smaller conferences, the Chamber of Commerce, if they're putting on a particular program for small businesses, there would be a lot more opportunity for that type of programming.
And because we don't have the definite design plans, how large that space will be, we do anticipate that we would have one large room that could be sectioned off into smaller spaces. But the occupancy capacity, we won't know until we get into the design.
Okay, this is one of those double questions. Aren't the two existing branches more convenient for most residents? And then isn't it the new proposal taking away from the high school students going there as an advantage?
Monopolizing the questions here. Okay, as a teen services librarian, I would say that that the new library will actually offer a lot more advantages. So I think it's a win for students. Right now, there isn't a place for them to do group study work. If they're working together on a project, there really isn't a space for them. There isn't, the librarians do as much as they can for them, but there isn't a space for them to just relax and be with their friends and use the library in the way that teens use the library. So this will be a better space for them to come, especially when they have projects that they need to do during evening hours when their school library maybe is not opened, during school breaks when they're trying to get a lot of group study done, and on weekends when the school libraries aren't open. So I think it will be an advantage for students with the new space. As far as more convenient or less convenient for people, that's a tough one. I would say probably for the people that do live right around each branch, it may be a little bit farther for them to travel to get to the centralized library. But as Terry pointed out in the presentation, the study that Larry did, we'd have the most central library in all the county. It would be no more than 3.6 or 3.7 miles from the farthest point in our town. So it would be more central for a lot of people as well.
I just want to add, as a librarian, a question like this really tears me up because you're right, we're right up the street from the high school. Sounds great, except that if the students from the high school actually come to the library, we don't have any place for them. Our teen center has 6 seats in it, and I think there's a few more than 6 students at the high school. So we have a choice between a great location that can't serve or a not quite as great location that can.
I'm just going to add one thing real quick. We made 3 presentations to the participation in government classes at Eastridge High School, and the kids were the ones who brought up the concept of, can't there be some place where we could work on group projects in the library without disturbing other people? And we've incorporated that into the plans that we intend to take to whatever engineer, architect we get. So the kids themselves have recognized the lack that these libraries have. That doesn't make much sense. Recognized what these libraries lack. Thank you.
The other opportunities that there might be is some libraries that have worked with their local school districts to get their library on the bus route. So we could work with the East Irondequoit School District. I understand that West Irondequoit School District does not have that ability, but we would be able to hopefully work with the school district to get the library to be a final stop on the bus routes.
As an added convenience, has anyone looked at contacting Wegmans to create a small shop there where people could pick up their milk, bread, and eggs?
If Wegmans would like to donate their name to the library, I'm sure we will get a small grocery store there for them.
We have, just for the record, we have not done that, but I think we should.
The board acts like it's a bad thing that people go to Greece and Webster libraries. Variety is good. We fortunately have quite a few libraries to use, none of which are all that far away.
Can I answer that? Because I do travel to use other libraries because ours don't meet the needs that I have for a library. The problem is that Greece and Webster residents aren't traveling here in the numbers that we're going there. So let's level that field. So Greece and Pittsford and Webster people who want to see our library and want to come and visit I Square or our new businesses on East Ridge Road, maybe it'll even out.
I think I should say one other thing too, and that is that kind of thinking will destroy those other libraries too. The Monroe County Library System is not run by Monroe County. The Monroe County Library System is run, it's a federation, and it is run by each individual library. And so we all cooperate together and we all pull on the same rope. So if the residents of the other towns start saying, well, why should we have such a great library so these people from these other towns can come over here and use it, then that starts a very slow dissolving of the library system, and it'll fall apart. Cooperation means that everybody pulls together, and if the second largest town in the county isn't pulling its weight, that's a signal that that doesn't bode well for the future.
Please address the future maintenance costs, staff costs, how those will be met, and will we have to raise taxes down the road?
I think that was somewhat answered in the previous question regarding it, that the staff, outside of regular increases, they didn't see any increase that shouldn't be within the cap. Is that correct?
Correct.
I should just say that the other towns that have built new libraries experience an increase in business of 20 to 40%. If they do a really great job, they can hang on to most of that. But we feel like if we take the existing staff we have now and combine them in that one building, then we can not only handle that sort of an increase, but we can probably actually expand the hours of the library. Most towns in this county, their libraries are open 7 days a week. Our library's never been open on Sunday, and for many years it was only open on Saturdays part of the year, or only half of the day. Really inadequate compared to what other towns are offering their residents. So we feel like in this combined facility, we can do all of that without increasing staff. And one of the interesting things about the library biz is that just like with a lot of sectors of the economy, we are graying, we are retiring, and we are being replaced by cheaper workers. And so there is some redundancy on our staff. Obviously, we don't need 2 branch managers, for instance. So when people retire, we often replace them, repurpose them with cheaper new entry-level employees, and we save money that way. It's just one more benefit of being in one building.
What economies can the board and the town take to lower the bond needs and requirements?
Well, one of the things that we've been talking with some of the architects that we've already been working with is one of the things, if we need to, is to eliminate the basement in the concept, because that will cut back on construction costs and the need, excuse me, for the first floor to be weight-bearing for library books. So there are some things that we can work with a designer to make sure that we're getting the most efficient building that we have for the best use of our money. I think, John, were you going to talk to that too?
Dealing with this most of my life, but there's a lot of design companies in town that probably will be interested in designing the library for Irondequoit, and I believe a lot of this stuff will be at top of their list on what we're talking about as far as design and that, and how we can save money and that type of thing. Depending on the square footage of the building, I mean, most buildings are going to go $200, $250 a square foot. I mean, it's always a square foot cost on a good design building, but I'm certainly sure a lot of this will be taken into consideration, how we're going to save money and where we can save money. I mean, basically, when you build a building like this, you put everything you want in a bucket, and then you start taking out little by little what you can't afford, and then eventually you get to a point where this is the building we want, and this is what we're looking at, and this is what we can afford as a town.
So what are we looking for in an architect? We're looking for a company that's got a lot of experience in attracting those grants that we were talking about, energy saving, green technology grants. We're looking for a firm that has a lot of experience with community engagement, so that when we have meetings, People from the public can attend them, tell us what they think. A lot of great ideas out there. The last time we had a design charrette with the Thomas Group back in 2005, we had some fabulous ideas for features that a new library could have. And so those are the sorts of things that we're looking for. And in terms of defraying cost, obviously those grants would be really, really big. If you go downtown and see the new, I think it's the new crime lab building downtown, that is I think a silver certified LEED building, which means they got a lot of money to help build that building because they were putting in a lot of new energy saving technologies.
One of the frequently asked questions also, will it be all local people? And the answer to that over the last few meetings, yes, it'll be local firms bidding on it, local construction, local architecture firms, and hopefully local people working on it. So that's one of the frequently asked questions too. Rich?
Next question. Why so large? Greece's population is twice that of Irondequoit. Do we nearly need this size building?
The study that was done that we keep referring to from 2005, the Thomas Group, we also, Thomas Group partnered with Dick Pan's Library Consulting. And he looked at different, a lot of different things when he came up with his building plan. And back then, he came up with a plan that we needed based on staff feedback, based on trends in library uses, taking into account the slowly shrinking need for physical book storage. He estimated that we would need about a 50,000 square foot library. So we say we need this space based on the experts. We also feel that we'd be able to utilize that space differently by incorporating flexible and adaptable program and meeting room space, so we may not need that larger space based on the creativity that an architect and a designer can come up with. Greece, that's often used as an example, they do have a larger population. They actually, at one time, had 5 library branches, and slowly over time, they economized and consolidated to one branch. They have a main branch, which is the 38 or 43,000 square feet. They also have a satellite branch, the Barnard Crossing branch, so they actually have 2 library branches still in their town. In addition, as Terry mentioned in the presentation, they have a full-blown community center with additional programming and meeting room space. So they have way more than the square footage of just their library.
Another question, I believe, is aren't they now in the process of adding on to the structure that they have now? So,
well, they since they're building, they cut out meeting room space, as Terry mentioned in his presentation. They cut out meeting room space to save money. Since they built the building about a decade ago, I think this might actually be their 3rd renovation, because they actually reconfigured their children's room some more and expanded again. This time they repurposed some of their space and renovated and built back in meeting room space.
So the objective of the board is build it once.
Right. Build it once, build it flexible, build it adaptable, so that so that future boards and future residents aren't faced with the same issues that we're being, faced with. At what do we do? Because we don't want that to happen. We don't want to outgrow our space the minute it's done being built.
We are also requesting that our staff go to the other libraries and see what works, what doesn't work, what the other librarians learned from their moves, from the builds and everything else, so that we are coming in with what we need right now.
And just one historical note, Helen McGraw was the first paid professional certified librarian in Irondequoit. That's why the McGraw branch is named the McGraw branch. And so it was like 1965, right, when they built the 2 branches. And in 1975, thanks to Pat Wayne, we know this, Pat Wayne, our historian, Helen McGraw sent a memo to whoever the trustees were and said that this building has been inadequate since it was first built. And she said there was no consideration of future library needs when the buildings were built in 1965. And so in less than 10 years, people were already starting to complain that the buildings were inadequate. And so as we said, we would like not to make the mistake that they made in 1965, not to cramp ourselves in. None of us has a crystal ball. we don't know exactly what the world is going to look like 30 years down the road, but we would like to be able to have people say, ooh, they were really smart, you know.
Go ahead, Rich.
At the end of the 8-year term for the bond, is that rate extendable, or would it go to a prevailing rate?
Yeah, the bond doesn't end at 8 years. At the end of 8 years, it can be called and paid off in full without any penalties at that point. So we're still going to be fundraising and everything else. As far as the town looks at, along with their fiscal advisors, does look at what their debt is, and then will refinance bonds as interest rates even lower to save on that. And I believe we've done that this past year with some good savings from that.
Following along with the money trail, can you elaborate on aggressive fundraising? What are you doing?
Okay, we have wait, I was looking over at the fundraising committee. But we have, the fundraising committee has been working on different levels, looking at what other libraries have done, looking at what other organizations have done for their fundraising. So we have different levels for fundraising. So there'll be, like I said, the top tier would be perhaps naming rights for the library, naming rights for different rooms, naming rights for different meeting room space. We feel very strongly that we will keep the McGraw and Evans names as foundations for anything that we do in each building. We also are looking at some creative ways for lower levels for everybody to be able to literally own a piece of their library. It's hard to explain it without looking at it visually, but think of like a flat wall, so it would look like a bookshelf, and instead of bricks for a walk, like at Lollipop, you could buy a brick, or I think Frontier Field did, you could buy a brick. You could buy a book spine, and it would create the illusion of, sorry, Carol, it would create the illusion of a bookshelf, and you could, it could be in memory of, each book spine would have people's names on it. So there's a lot of different ways that we can raise money for all different levels.
But you also have to know that we were advised by people who do this, you can't start fundraising till you know what you are fundraising for. So we can't go out to people and say, will you donate to a library if maybe we're able to have it. If you want to know, the fundraising committee has a meeting set for April 24th. So we are hoping that everything goes well with the bond vote, and then, we're ready to hit the ground running.
And when that bond vote comes back, yes, we will be on the road running.
Here's a two-part question. Has the cost been how has the cost been calculated, and what happens when we start construction and the costs are higher?
You take that because of the construction.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, once we get the building designed and it goes out to bid, I mean, it's going to be a public bid, and, I don't think construction is not going to be increased once you get a hard bid. They're going to be, that's the number you're going to be going with. And what we talked about, there won't be any increase in construction because it's going to be a public bid, and that's the number they're going to have to be with. Now, looking at the site there, I mean, on a remodel job, sometimes you'll have some overruns in situations like that. But this site out there is a pretty clean, shovel-ready site, we can call it. And it's not the type of job that I don't believe that you're going to see a lot of overrun costs there. But when people, when people bid the job, this is what they're bidding at, they'll have to honor that cost.
Thank you.
I would just add that we've had some very serious discussions with architects and engineers, and we've looked at the experiences of library construction in other towns. And the architects were very, very serious with us. You don't save much money by buying less fancy furniture or cheaper carpets. The only way that you reduce the cost of a project is to shrink the size of the building. So we feel like whatever amount of money that we can get together is what we're going to have to spend. And just like they did in Greece, we may have to shrink some things down if it costs more than we think it's going to cost. But that's how you build a building and keep it at the cost that you're saying that it's going to be. So I guess what we're saying here is that if we say that this is what the building costs, that's what it's going to cost.
What happens if the referendum does not pass? Can we revote?
I'm not sure I could do this all over again. We've talked about this as a board. If the bond does not pass, we will be faced with far more difficult decisions than do we cut out a meeting room, or do we cut down a tree, or do we move a tree. The decisions that we will be faced with, because the reality is that our budget is not such that we can maintain, we cannot sustain supporting 2 equal service branches less than 3 miles apart. So options will be on the table up to and including us having 1 branch. That would be the harsh reality. That would probably be the worst case scenario, but it would be a scenario that we would have to consider.
And if we have 1 branch, that 1 branch really is not adequate to serve the entire town. So if we're cramped now, it would be even worse.
But let's put it all on the table, okay? Which you probably don't want me to do, but if we have 1 branch, we'd have to improve the branch that we own.
Right. And the branch that we own that has the most potential to be bigger is the McGraw branch.
Where can a resident get a sign, say, vote yes?
See, I have 2. I will sell them. I'll hold an auction and we'll raise money for the library. I have 2 in my hallway if someone wants one. We're down to that few.
At this point, we have given out 500 signs, which I think speaks to the amount of support that this project has in town. And it's too late to do a second order. So,
Or a third order.
a third order, yeah, because we did do a second order. And
You could start time sharing. Yeah. Move them to various corners for a week at a time.
Go ahead, Rich.
Assuming the referendum passes, how would someone sign up for a contribution for the fundraising?
Yeah.
We'll find you.
Leave a name.
And
There are actually on the tables out front, there are blue pledge forms, so you don't have to necessarily specify your amount, but if you do want to be contacted sometime after April 24th, someone from the foundation or the fundraising committee will contact you. That's the blue form.
Rich?
once the referendum passes, is it true that you'll be hiring a real estate broker from Hudson Avenue? Listing the McGraw?
We already own the land. Nice try, Rich, okay? We have no more formal questions. And actually, the ready questions that I usually have are about the coffee shop and the 4th of July and such as that. We've answered the question multiple times into different things concerning why we can't stack them on top of each other over at the Evans branch. This is what, our 6th public hearing?
Six, yeah.
Fifth?
Fifth public forum.
I thought it felt like 6.
20.
Okay. So in closing, why don't we have each member of the board give a little speech regarding the matter.
Mary Joyce, did you want to?
Oh, you want me to speak
Yeah,
first?
you can. We'll just do closing comments right down the road.
Okay, I want you to visualize this town. Last Thursday, I went on a 3-hour drive of the town, drove the full perimeter, and then went along the side streets. And as I constantly tell people, you cannot compare this town to any other town. No other town has the architecturally distinct housing stock that we have. The tree-lined streets, almost 300 miles of sidewalks. We have it all here, from appliances to carpets to zucchini. This town is a diamond in the rough. And like anything we take ownership of, we have to maintain it. If I were to think about the 30-year mortgage on my house on top of the home equity, which at one time which was a much higher interest rate, which is like a revolving credit card, obviously I would have paid more for my house from the mortgage interest than what I actually paid for it. But I love my house. I love all the trees in my yard. I love my neighbors, and I love living in Irondequoit. And no, I haven't lived here all my life. I've lived in many zip codes, and no town is as beautiful as this town. We need to invest in our assets, our infrastructure. And the library is just as important to us as DPW, the Public Works, as the police department, as our parks. The library is what we owe to ourselves in our effort to unite Irondequoit. Is not East Irondequoit or West Irondequoit, but one town, Irondequoit, a town that prides itself on education, intelligence, and cultural arts. No offense to our libraries, but where I come from, those small town libraries are offering more, architecturally much more stimulating, and it's time that Irondequoit not be a second-class town to these other towns. I had one group of men, I won't say which library they were meeting at, but they were upset when a particular library supply was cut from the budget. And those residents started going to another town. And when they went to that town, they told me they took their dry cleaning with them. They weren't getting it at the dry cleaners next to the library branch. They also were not eating at the restaurants on Ridge Road or even in town. They were taking all their business to another town. That hurts Irondequoit. We need to support our own local businesses. So think about this as your town. We have to stop living in the 80s. We need to think about the future, that we have other generations besides the baby boomer generation or whatever generation we all happen to be. We need to think about the future and what's in the best interest of this town and what will increase our property values, because our homes tend to be our largest investment, in which when we sell that, we want a return on that investment. And this library will, I think, as Rick indicated to you, will increase our property values. And in terms of that real estate agent, we have to do an RFP.
Yes, real quick, I think it's been a long time since this town has had a project like this. I think the public safety building in the back was probably the last time that a project similar to this, and that was probably 20 or 30 years ago. And I look at things as well. Building a library creates jobs, creates construction jobs, vendors around town, and hopefully once we get to the bid process, I would love to see, and we'll make sure that the contractors know that. I'd like to see some of our residents in town that are in the trades get on this job and work, and nothing's prouder than being on a job that the town that you live in, you're helping build a building such as the library. And in closing, what I'm going to want to say, and I say this all the time, this library board is really working hard. I'm telling you, it's a 24/7 situation that I got myself into, but I've been glad I've done it. But they are a hard-working group, and really they've done, and people in this town should really appreciate how hard they've worked.
Well, just to shortly amplify what Mary Joyce said, I just would want you all to consider your vote on April 23rd. I hope you understand how much time and effort has been put into this proposal. It's not something that has happened in the last 5 years. It's not something that's happened in the last 10 years. It's not something that's even was conceived of 15 years ago. And I would just, again, ask you to seriously consider your vote on April 23rd, and I trust that the residents of Irondequoit will make the right decision.
This is our last best opportunity to construct this facility, which we direly need, at interest rates that I don't think any of us have ever seen as low as they are now. In addition, by doing this, we will definitely attract younger people to the town, and that will have a positive effect on home sales and real estate values. Thank you.
I second, whoops, what happened? I second everything that was said before me, and I just want to say, many people seem to be a little confused on where to vote. So if you're coming to vote, if you picked up the packets, if you look at page 9, on the bottom of page 9 it says the vote, and then it says when is the vote and where will I vote. The answer is on page 10. For all intents and purposes, unless you got that postcard, if you live in the East Arundequoit School District, you're going to vote at the firehouse at Ridge Culver. If you live in the West Arundequoit School District, you're going to vote in the firehouse on Cooper Road. Many people have in the mindset, oh, we go to the schools to vote like you vote on the school budget, but this is not a school project. So please, please, please spread this information to your friends and neighbors. I don't want people coming to vote and being at the wrong place. And if you're in the library between now and the 23rd, there's little bookmarks right by the checkout that say on the bottom of them, where is the vote? Okay? Shall I say this one more time?
No, you're good.
Okay.
It's gratifying to see this kind of turnout. I mean, this is really democracy at the grassroots level, and to have such a great turnout at this forum is terrific. I thank you for your interest, because this is one very hardworking board, and we really appreciate your interest. And on the fundraising issue, every member of this board has made a financial pledge. So already in this quiet phase of fundraising that we're at now, money has already been raised, and that is how strongly the board feels about this library. So please know that our money is where our mouths have been.
I just want to say thank you for all of you for coming out tonight, listening. And if you have questions and still need something answered, the contact information is on the back of the form that you received. Please email us and we'll get back to you.
Ditto to what everybody else said, and I always have to write my comments out, but I'll talk really quickly, Joe. I can really talk quickly. Sometimes I talk too quickly. But I want to thank you all for coming again. This proposal has come after many, many, many years of discussions and studies. And these public forums and all of our community presentations have provided us with your valuable input that we'll use down the road. This proposal and the vote are just the first steps in the process. The community will be involved in every step along the way, and the designs and needs will be evaluated throughout that process. If the referendum passes, we will send out requests for proposals to architects. From the selection of the architect to the creation of the final design, there will be an open and transparent process with public input. If adjustments are needed to be made, or if adjustments are needed in the size and scope of the facility we currently envision, we will make those changes based in part on these community discussions and community discussions held with the architect and the feedback we have received throughout the past many months. Flexibility and adaptability will be vital elements for the design. We don't want to build something that will be inadequate the minute the building is done. Communities in the past who have cut out spaces have often regretted, as we mentioned. Traffic, parking, green space, and other town activities will all be considerations in the final design. Money will be spent in a fiscally responsible way that gets us the best result to meet our needs. Just because the voters approve borrowing up to $13 million doesn't mean we have to spend it all. And we don't need to borrow all the money, and we certainly don't need to borrow it all at once, allowing for lower interest short-term borrowing with much lower interest rates. Fundraising and grants will offset as much of the cost as possible, and we will own the building with no leasing involved and no property being taken off the tax rolls. If you have any additional questions or need clarification, please let us know. You can contact us by phone or email or visit the libraryproposal.com website to learn more. We have all worked really hard to make sure that residents have the correct information and facts that they need to cast their vote. I want to thank the Friends of the Irondequoit Library, who are such staunch supporters, and they've helped us in ways beyond this evening, and it's just amazing all the work that they do. I want to thank Joe Janier and Rich Orzak for their assistance. And thanks again to you all for being a part of this very important discussion. The vote on April 23rd will determine the future of our library and the future of our town.
Please vote.
One more thing, folks. I have to be senior person in the town here. I've been 65 something. I was a small child when I got here. This town needs to grow, and we haven't. Some of the things that have been around that we've paid our taxes for has shown a little growth. A baseball field at the corner of Winton Road and Empire Boulevard. The few contributions that our tax money made for the path along the lake. All right, those are the things that are make our town better. Thing with you, with all the folks here, you got to remember one thing. We'll see this building. Hopefully, we're all going to be around. Okay, then you'll be able to use it. Your children will be able to use it, and your grandchildren will be able to use it. So I challenge you. He just wants you to go vote. I want you to go call 4 or 5 friends and have them go vote for you. Okay? Thank you very much for being here tonight. Checks in the mail.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Our celebrities.